So to help improve the security of how we write apps, let's talk a little bit about how Android protects our apps from other apps. And then once we understand how it protects our apps, we can also understand what it doesn't do for us and what it expects us as developers to do to ensure that our apps stay safe and secure. So the first thing that Android does is whenever you go and launch an app, as we've seen before, that app has its own user account associated with it that determines what it can and can't do. But it also is launched in its own process. So your app is launched in its own process, and what a process does is it's an operating system construct that protects the memory of your app while it's running from the memory of other applications. So your app will run in a process, and if there's some malware that might be trying to attack your app, it'll be running in its own separate process. So we'll have another process, and we'll have your original process. Now what this means is, if your app's memory is protected, let's say that this is the I Remember app, and we have a variable that, for example, maybe it's the server that we're going to save data to or try to log into. So maybe we have a server variable defined in one of our Java classes. Well, what the processed memory protections means is that the second process can't go and directly write to this variable. So this is not allowed. That would be a violation of the security that processes provide to separate the memory from each other. Now you can see why this is so important. If this malware could go and directly change a variable in your code, for instance, if it could go and change some variable telling where the I Remember app should log in and tell it to go and log into another server, for example, it could go and capture your username and password and do all kinds of other malicious things. So the memory protections that a process provides are very important. So we get memory protection on our apps from other apps running on Android at the same time. Another very important thing that Android provides is it provides a guarantee on the storage, or the things that your app decides to persist to the storage on the device. So what do we care about in this case? Well, we care about that we can save state for our app because our app may not always be running, and that when we go and relaunch that application, we know that that state will still be intact and in its original condition. So you can think about, for example, if you were storing important data about the state of your app to disk, and another app could come in, overwrite that state and change it, then you could do a lot of very malicious things from another app. So it's very important that Android protects whatever state or information we save to the underlying storage system. So what types of state can we save that get protected by Android? Well, the very first and important piece of state that we might save, for example, is the APK for our app. So when we go and actually create an app, we're creating a package that's going to be stored on the underlying file system on the device that has all of our code in it. So if another app could go and directly manipulate our APK, it could change the behavior of our app in whatever way it wanted. So it's very important that we protect these APKs for our apps when they're installed, and Android does that for us. It provides protections over the APKs of each app. So your app can't go and overwrite or change another app's APK, and those apps can't go and change your app's APK. Well, what are other types of things that we might want to store and protect? Things like the database. So if your app wants to store data in the SQLite database on a device, you can store that database. And Android, depending on how you store that data, and we'll talk about this, will protect that data so that only your app can read data in the database that you're writing. Other things that you might want to persist are settings for your app. And those could also be persisted. So how does Android go about actually protecting these things under the hood? Well, the way that Android does it, as we've seen before, is that each app has its own user account, and that essentially defines an area of the storage on the device that's assigned to that app. So if another app goes and tries to write to this area of storage, it can't, because that's owned by that other app's user account. So by default, Android gives us two really important things. It gives us the ability to protect our application's memory from other apps running so they can't change our variables or our runtime state. And then also, it gives us the ability to protect the data that we save to disk or to storage on our device. And that's protecting our state that's persisted between launches. So what Android's giving us is the ability to protect our app both when it's running by protecting state that's in the process of that app, and then secondly, any state that we need to store, because it is a mobile device and apps get shut down from time to time, the battery on the phone dies and we need to be able to save state, it protects all of that state that we save on the underlying storage system in a special area that's assigned to our app.